So, every forum discussion you've probably been in, every person you've talked to, every video you've watched has said if you're buying a house, you would be mad to buy it without getting a structural survey done. Well, in this film, I'm going to tell you to go with the mad option because there is a much better alternative. And I'll explain why after this intro. I'm Tim Hill, internet entrepreneur, property investor, and author of How to Really Buy a Property. No, it's not one of those books that goes on and on about how you can make millions investing in property, and all you have to do is go on my course to learn the secrets, and then you go on my course and you find out that you have to go on my master course to learn the real secrets. None of that. If you have decided to buy a property, no matter what your motivation, then How to Really Buy a Property is the smart way to do it. And it will save you time, money, and stress. Okay, first thing is this. A standard, cheap valuation survey of a property will tell you if there are any structural issues with that property, or whether the surveyor suspects there are any structural issues with that property. That's really important. I'll come to it in a minute. So, it's the value of the property. So if the surveyor goes round just to do the valuation and he suspects that there's subsidence, he sees some major crackings in the wall, then he's going to come back and say, you offered 200,000 on that property. I don't think it's worth 200,000 at the moment because I suspect that there is subsidence going on. Now, you could, instead of getting the valuation survey done, which will only cost you about 100 quid, go for the full structural survey. But there's a huge problem with that. Let's start with the big one, things like the structure. Okay, so the structure of the building, the structural surveyor is not qualified to say that building is subsiding. He's only qualified to say, I think that building is subsiding. So if you've seen the S word, subsidence, on your survey, it doesn't mean that there is subsidence. It's just the surveyor saying, in my point of view, and it needs to be checked more carefully. The structural surveyor is also not an electrician. They're not a plumber. They're not a gas qualified person. They're not a roofer. And they're not a damp specialist. Okay, so all they can do is say, I think, in my point of view, maybe. Now, they might go to the point, and this is really, really important to understand. If the structural surveyor says to you, there's £20,000 worth of roofing work which needs to be done, they shouldn't say that. No professional surveyor will say that because they're not a roofer. They don't know what the actual cost of repairing that roof is. They know how to look and see telltale signs that the roof's not quite right and something probably needs to be done about it, but only a roofer can tell you what needs to be done and how much it's going to cost. So that's wrong, and I've seen it. I've seen a surveyor who went round to a lower ground floor flat and came back and they said to the buyer, there's £5,000 worth of damp in that property, the damp work which needs to be done. It cost £5,000 to put it right. And the buyers were really freaked about this. Understandably, if you're really stretching yourself to buy a property and the first thing you're going to be faced with is a £5,000 bill, you're not going to be happy. So we got a damp proofing company to go round. So this is a company. We didn't tell them about the £5,000. We said, can you go round and, check that area? I think it was in the hallway of the property. Check the hallway and see what you find. And obviously a damp proof company, they're going to be looking for work. Okay, they're going to be motivated to find something to do. Their quote was, I think, in the end, £700, something like that, £700 or £800. And in their actual quote, they'd made the point of that it wasn't particularly urgent work either. So the surveyor made up this figure of £5,000 out of his head, but the company that would actually do the work said £700, but, whenever. It's not going to be causing you a major problem. That was an unprofessional surveyor. They do exist. They come along and they think they know, how much things cost, but they don't. Don't confuse what's called retention also with the cost of works. So say a surveyor goes round to a house is £200,000, and he says, I'm worried about the roof. That property is worth £200,000 if the roof is in good shape, but right now I'm going to say the value is £160,000. Okay. He's not saying there's £40,000 worth of roofing work to be done. He's just choosing a very big figure to cover what it possibly could be. Until a roofer goes round and says, yeah, I can see, you need to replace those beams or the flashing, but it's just the flashing and it's going to cost about £2,000. Until they go round and give you the actual figure, their estimate for actually doing the work, we just don't know. So surveyors tend to be, professional ones, tend to be on the very, very cautious side. So retentions, holding money back, it's just a big block of money to cover every kind of possibility about what needs to be done on the roof until we can say what actually needs to be done. And then when you present that quote from the roofer, the surveyor will go, okay, £2,000, so I say the property isn't worth £200,000, it's worth £198,000. Or he might go, well, only £2,000 on a property of that kind of value, it's worth £200,000 then. So fine. So if you're not going to get a structural survey done, what should you be doing to stop people saying that you're absolutely insane? Okay, this is what I do. If it's a house, especially if it's an older house, say over 100 years old, a period property, I'll get the standard valuation done because that will flag up anything that's really major. Okay? Anything that will substantially affect the value of the property, like subsidence, it's going to get flagged there. Then if I'm not that happy about the structure anyway, I'll instruct a structural engineer. Only a structural engineer can tell you if there's a problem with the structure, okay? Not the structural surveyor. So I instruct the structural engineer, go round and do his report. That's going to cost me the same amount of money as a structural survey. Okay, might be a little bit more, but it's going to be in the same ballpark. And I'm going to pay an electrician to check the electrics. I'm going to pay a plumber to check the plumbing. I'm going to pay for gas certification to be done. That's about £100. If nothing's been done in the last 12 months, rental properties, usually they have that in the last every 12 months. What else? I'm going to pay a roofer to go and have a look at the roof, and I'm going to pay a damp-proof company if I can't get one who does quotes for free, like Kenwood's in London. Kenwood's in London do go around for free, but if I can't, then I will pay a damp-proofing company to go around and have a look and see if there are any damp issues. So far, I've probably spent with all of that twice as much as I would have spent with a structural survey. Now, if it's quite an old property, and in certain circumstances, I might also pay for a specialist company that goes and puts a camera down the drain. A lot of very old properties, the drainage is old ceramic pipes, which can be prone to crack up and then just completely collapse. And if it runs underneath this huge, property, it's going to cost a fortune, like dig it up and replace the piping. So there's these specialist companies, they've got cameras which go down in the darkness in the pipes and just check, if there's any cause for alarm. So in certain circumstances, I might get that done. And then I'm paying more than twice for the structural survey. But what have I got? I've got an absolute picture of the property, the state of the property. And that is also going to help me budget further down the line. I might not be able to renegotiate the price because, nothing's perfect. No property's perfect, especially a very old property. But I will have some idea that there's going to be work coming up on the electrics, or that I'm probably going to have to replace the hot water tank in the near future, or that the gas boiler's on its last legs and that's going to need to be replaced soon. These are all things which, generally speaking, I might not have that room to renegotiate the price. That's not my motivation mainly, unless I find something big. But it is my motivation to know what's going to be coming up so I can think about costs going forward and how I'm going to manage those costs. So I've spent a bit more now to get a much clearer picture straight away about the property. Now, especially in old properties, most of the reports you're going to get back are kind of going to have some bad news in them. The roofer is going to be looking for some roofing work. The electrician is going to be looking for some electrical work to do. That's why really I prefer to pay people to go around and have a look. Anybody who's going around for free is really going to find something to do. Electrics are a real case in point because electrical standards are always moving and evolving. This means that most old properties are going to fail any kind of electrical test because the light switch is too high, excuse me, the plug socket is too low, all these sort of things. They're not in line with modern building regulations. Fine, but they're not also something which needs to be changed. Yes, it's great now that light switches, there are regulations that say light switches need to be brought down so that they're reachable by wheelchair users, more accessible. It's not something I'm going to have changed, though. There's no legal requirement for me to have that work done if I buy the property. So all these reports will dig up some work. Excuse me. And you need to have a careful think about, is there anything in there which I'm going to go and ask for a renegotiation on the price? Or am I just going to say, well, that's fair for a property of that age? Because if we're in a very buoyant market, I go around and think, the flashings on the roof, they need to be replaced in 5 years. Well, hey, roofs do need to have work done on them regularly. And the vendor might just tell me to sod off. In fact, I might annoy the vendor so much, he just says, "You're trouble. I want to sell to somebody else." Okay, so you've got to take kind of your own call on this. How much do you think there's room for any renegotiation on anything you find? And the vendor would also know, hey, if they sold to someone who wasn't as switched on as you, he would just get his structural survey done. They wouldn't mention any of this, and I would get the price I want. So tread carefully on thinking that this is a smart way to renegotiate the price. It is. So that's my approach. Structural surveys, I'm not knocking the surveyors. They're highly qualified people. They've done a lot of training. But in these cases, they are jacks of all trades and masters of none. So you might as well get the masters of each of those trades to go round, have a look, and give you the real lowdown. Cost you a bit more now, help your budget in the future though. And also, when you come to sell that house, say you came to sell the house in 10 years, and you can actually say, hey, 10 years ago, a structural engineer came and did this report. That's a real plus when you're coming to sell, and it will make the property more sellable. I'm not saying it may, increase the value in any way, except you're more likely to get the asking price because you're more likely to get more buyers interested. I want an old property, but hey, structural report here, electrical report, plumbing report, I've got everything, plus any work which I would have done. Say, new boiler or something like that, or new flashings on the roof. So it's a good move, and that's why the people who talk theory, they say structural surveyor, because that's what's in the textbook. You're buying a house, get a structural surveyor. Structural surveyor can't really tell you anything about the structure beyond, I think, maybe the valuation surveyor will do the same if it's going to affect the valuation of the property, which something like subsidence will. So there isn't actually much point. The only people who recommend that kind of approach are the people who live in the theoretical world of buying property. If you've really bought property before, then you'll know that the smart way to do it is to get the specialists in and get the true state of the property from the off. Okay, that's it. That's all for this short video. There's much more information in the book, How to Really Buy a Property. As always, if you found this information useful, please remember to subscribe, to share, to like, to do all those social media things. It all helps other people who need this information find it more easily. If you've got some specific questions which you'd like me to have a go at answering, please put them in the comments below and I'll try and get to them. And in the meantime, good luck with your property purchase.